During the 1930s, many challenges of peace followed a pattern. Mussolini, Hitler, and leaders of Japan saw peace as a sign of weakness and responded with acts of aggression. One of the earlier calls for peace and equality occurred in Japan. Japanese military leaders and ultranationalists believed that Japan should have had an equal empire to the Western powers. Japan seized Manchuria in 1931 in hopes to achieve their goal. This resulted in Japan withdrawing from the League of Nations. Their militarist faction in Japan strengthened as a result from their success. Their armies overran most of eastern China, causing the start of the Second Sino-Japanese War. Meanwhile, in Italy, Mussolini acted on his own imperialist ambitions. Thanks to his tanks, machine guns, poison gases, and airplanes, Italy successfully invaded Ethiopia in 1935. Although Italy had violated international law, the League of Nations had no power to enforce penalties against Italy. So by 1936, Italy conquered Ethiopia. Hitler began to test the will of Western democracies and, in conclusion, found it weak. He built the German military in defiance of the treaty that ended World War I, and in 1936 he sent tools into Rhineland, which was bordering France. Hitler's successful challenge made him very popular because many Germans hated the Versailles Treaty. As a result, Western democracies adopted a policy of appeasement, or giving into the demands of an aggressor in order to keep the peace. In Britain and France, many people saw Hitler and fascism as a defense against the spread of Soviet communism. Eventually, widespread pacifism or opposition to all war pushed many governments to seek peace. In the mid-1930s, the United States Congress passed a series of neutrality acts as war clouds gathered in Europe. The laws consisted of outlawing loans to warring nations, the prohibition of Americans traveling on ships of the warring powers, and forbidding the sale of arms to any nations at war. The goal of American policy was to avoid any involvement in a European war. Germany, Italy, and Japan felt weak and intimidated by the Allies, so they created the Axis powers to fight Soviet communism. They agreed not to interfere with one another's plan for territorial expansion, and the agreement encouraged them to take bold steps.
Trouble in Spain started in 1931 when popular unrest against the old order forced the king to leave Spain. A republic was set up with a new, more liberal constitution, and the government passed a series of controversial reforms, taking land and privileges away from the church and old ruling classes. In 1936, a conservative general named Francisco Franco led a revolt that touched off a bloody civil war. Fascists and supporters of right-wing policies called nationalists rallied to back Franco. Supporters of the Republic, known as Loyalists, included communists, socialists, and those who wanted democracy. Hitler and Mussolini sent arms and forces to help Franco. The Soviet Union sent soldiers to fight against fascism alongside the Spanish Loyalists. Although the governments of Britain, France, and the United States remained neutral, individuals from those countries as well as other countries fought with the Loyalists. Anti-Nazi Germans and anti-fascist Italians joined the Loyalist cause as well. In April 1937, there was a German air raid on Guernica, a small Spanish market town. German planes dropped their loads of bombs and then swooped low to machine gun anyone who survived the bombs. By 1939, Franco had triumphed. Once in power, he created a fascist dictatorship similar to Hitler and Mussolini. He rolled back earlier reforms, killed or jailed enemies, and used terror to promote order.
By now, Hitler was trying to achieve his goal of bringing all German-speaking people into the Third Reich. He also took living space for Germans, in which Hitler believed in the superiority of the Aryan people that thought Germany had the right to conquer the inferior Slavs to the east. Ever since the beginning, Nazi propaganda had found the fertile ground in Austria, where Hitler was ready to engineer the Anschluss or union of Austria and Germany. But before that, he had forced the Australian Chancellor to appoint Nazis to key cabinet posts. Hitler then sent a German army to preserve order and indicate his new role as ruler of Austria. The Anschluss violated the Versailles Treaty and started a brief war scare. Some Austrians favored annexation, as a result causing Hitler to silence any Austrian who opposed it. Western democracies took no action, so he had his way. Germany eventually turned to Czechoslovakia. Hitler insisted that the 3 million Germans in Sudetenland, a region of western Czechoslovakia, be given autonomy. Czechoslovakia was the two remaining democracies in Eastern Europe, but Britain and France were still not willing to go to war and save it. While British and French rulers were looking for a peaceful solution, Hitler increased his demands and said that the Sudetenland must be annexed to Germany. At the Munich Conference in September 1938, British and French leaders chose appeasement again. They agreed to Hitler's demands and persuaded the Czechs to surrender Sudetenland without a fight. Therefore, Hitler assured Britain and France that he would not expand his territory. When coming back from Munich, Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain told the crowd that he achieved peace of our time. He claimed that the Munich Pact has saved Czechoslovakia from destruction. On the other hand, French leader Edward Daladier had different reaction than the crowd. While British politician Winston Churchill judged the diplomats harshly, he made them choose between war and dishonor, but in the end, they still chose dishonor.
Later on, Hitler broke the promises he made and conquered Czechoslovakia. The democracies then accepted that appeasement had failed. They made a promise to protect Poland, which was the next territory everyone expected Hitler to conquer. In August 1939, Hitler announced a non-aggression pact, or the Nazi-Soviet Pact, with his enemy Joseph Stalin. In this pact, the two seemed as if they were bound to peaceful relations, but in actuality, it was an agreement to not fight if the other went to war and to divide up Poland and other parts of Eastern Europe between them. The pact was based on mutual need between the two. Hitler feared communism and Stalin feared fascism. Hitler did not want to fight both the Soviet Union and Western democracies. Stalin had sought allies in the Western democracies that were against the Nazi menace. Suspicions kept the two nations apart. As a result, with this pact, the Soviet Union was protected from a threat of war against Germany and got an opportunity to gain land in Eastern Europe. Then, a week after the pact, on September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland, causing Britain and France to declare war on Germany. This started World War II.